Well, I'd like to wish everybody a good evening and welcome to the College of Complexes. My name is Tim. I'm your very late videographer, but we do have our guests have requested AV. We have it up and running and ready to go. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to our infamous Saturday Free Speech Forum. Tonight we have the Chicago Colloquium to shut down Guantanamo. And I'd like to just remind those of our brief outline or agenda of events. There'll first be a brief announcements period, followed by our speakers. Then there'll be a question and answer period following the main presentation. Then there'll be our infamous rebuttal period where you'll get to say your piece of mind on the subject or off the subject.
All right, without any further ado, we will now hear from our speakers tonight of the Chicago Coalition to Shut Down Guantanamo. And the speakers are Jay Beaker, who is standing here, and also Mario Venegas of the Illinois Coalition Against Torture. All right, the world can't wait for Jay Beaker.
Just a real brief introduction. I'm with the World Can't Wait. Mario is with the Illinois Coalition Against Torture. And our two groups are part of a larger coalition that came together last February, or March, when the hunger strike began in Guantanamo. But we thought we would show, with Tim's help, a couple of videos that will much more poetically give you an idea of who's on hunger strike and why. That's the first video. It's just about 7.5 minutes. The second video, a word of warning, it is a video of forced feeding. The Guardian newspaper in the United Kingdom filmed this forced feeding of a rap star, used to be called Mos Def, who subjected himself to, he's converted to Islam, and he subjected himself to forced feeding to be videotaped so that the world could see what this actually entails. That's about 4 minutes. It's hard to watch. I'm just giving you a warning. It's hard to watch, but I think it's really important for us to understand the reality of what our government is doing to these men at Guantanamo. So those are the videos we're going to have. Then we'll talk very briefly and open it up to you guys.
occupied Afghanistan and now occupy cells at Guantanamo Bay.
I will close Guantanamo. I will restore habeas corpus.
I have said repeatedly that I intend to close Guantanamo, and I will follow through on that. I've said repeatedly that America doesn't torture, and I'm going to make sure that we don't torture.
In the interest of justice, I hereby order. And we then provide the process whereby Guantanamo will be closed no later than 1 year from now.
Well, President Obama held a press conference earlier today, and he said he still wants to close the Guantanamo Bay prison facility, but he doesn't know how to do it. He should do what he always does, declare it a small business and tax it out of existence. We'll be gone in a minute. Be gone in a minute. 1 month. Be out of there.
I continue to believe that we've got to close Guantanamo.
Before we was captured, before we was kidnapped, we thought Americans had what they call justice, liberty, freedom, democracy.
Peace. My name is Yassine Bey, and I'm here today to demonstrate the standard operating procedure for force-feeding detainees at Guantanamo Bay. Good morning. Please, don't. No, please, stop. Stop it, please. Stop! That's just me. Please stop. I can't do it anymore. I really want to thank you guys for setting this up and even having the idea to do it. I really didn't know what to expect. I remember tubing in, and the first part of it is not that bad, but then you get this burning. I had this burning. And then it just starts to be like really unbearable. It feels like something was going into my brain, and it started to reach to the back of my throat, and I really couldn't take it. My name is Yassine Bey, and I've just taken part in a demonstration with standard operating procedure for force-feeding detainees at Guantanamo Bay. Peace and good morning.
Just commenting on the video, as actually typical of what's gone on in this country in the last 12 years. That is recognized as torture under international law and by any country that upholds international law. It is considered legal in the U.S. now, and under U.S. civil and military law, that is considered legal. Just this week, the research in the Journal of Pre-Hospital and Disaster Medicine, health professionals are calling for the revocation of the license of military personnel who participate in that, as a minimum of upholding medical ethics at least. But that's where we've come to in this country, where that has been legalized, really going back to the Military Commissions Act. But just to update you, we felt this was important. We wish that every American had to see this, what's going on every day with dozens of people in our name, twice a day. I have here flyers that all of us in the Coalition to Shut Down Guantanamo pass out every week down at the federal courthouse here in Chicago, the scene of the crime, as I like to put it, that will bring you up to date. There are now, this is a few months old, as you saw, there are now 18 men who remain on hunger strike. 17 of them are being force-fed by this procedure twice a day. There are 164 men still imprisoned in Guantanamo. The vast majority, 155, have never been charged with a crime, have obviously never had a trial, even a sham trial. 84 of them, that's more than half of the men at Guantanamo, have been cleared for release by the U.S. government, cleared by the Pentagon, the CIA, all of them. In other words, there's not even a pretense that they ever committed any crime. And this is, most of them have been cleared 3, 4, 5 years ago, and yet they remain in Guantanamo. So that's the situation. It is, in fact, the hunger strike itself that led to Obama reiterating his promise again to close Guantanamo on May 23rd, that it created such a outcry around the world. Unfortunately, not enough here. I'll pass these around. This is our coalition flyer, if people want to take one. Every week we update it. This is an ad that the World Can't Wait published on the same, it came out the same day that Obama gave his speech on May 23rd, calling for Guantanamo to be closed and linking it to the whole program of an assault on the rule of law and basic human rights that has been continued under Obama. And we raised tens of thousands of dollars from concerned people in this country to do that. So this gives you a little bit more background too. And finally, I'd just like to read, I think that another implication of the video of Yasin Bey is the international view. That is what many people in the world see as America. That is what this country is doing, especially people of the Muslim faith, people in the Middle East. But I also want to just read a paragraph from a letter that comes from a prisoner at Pelican Bay here in the U.S. That he wrote. Pelican Bay is a special prison built for solitary confinement. The man who wrote this letter is in solitary confinement for days, weeks, years on end, which is also considered torture under international law. And this is what he wrote. From Pelican Bay to Guantanamo, we share the same torturer. The 166 men who are being tortured in Guantanamo Bay are doing the world a solid. What they are doing by sacrificing their bodies in the hunger strike are re-educating the world. These brave men are holding a study group, and the world is the audience. The topic is, what is American torture? We are learning how depraved U.S. imperialism is and what methods it employs on third world peoples. We are learning how at least 100 have been tortured to death in the name of the war on terror. We know over half the men have been cleared for release, having not been tried of any crime, but still they are tortured, living in chains, hooded, and deprived of everything that makes one human. But for over 100 days, these brave men have had the world stage to educate people on the vileness of U.S. imperialism. They have been so effective during these 100 days that many of us, even here in this torture center known as Pelican Bay, SHU, have learned more about the torture going on at Guantanamo. We sit here in windowless cells and held in solitary, but we have begun to learn more about what is taking place. And a couple of men here have even begun to hunger strike in solidarity with Guantanamo, because what we have realized is that the thing that links Pelican Bay SHU with Guantanamo is we share the same torture. That's this country. I'll pass these around too if anyone's interested in this letter. So, and my friend here is Mario Venegas, who, an introduction you wanted to speak.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Mario Venegas. I'm originally from Chile, South America. And I work for many human rights organizations here in the Chicago area. Amnesty International, School of the Americas Watch, the Coalition to Shut Down Guantanamo, Illinois Coalition Against Torture, which is part of this coalition, and some other human rights organizations. And the reason why I work so hard in defense of human rights and denouncing the atrocities that have been committed in different countries, and particularly in my own country in Chile, is because I am a survivor of torture. I spent 2.5 years in concentration camps in Chile. I was tortured and I was expelled from my country. For 15 years I was not allowed to go back to my own country. And so I have been living outside. I can return now, although the conditions are much better, but still, it's 40 years since that military coup in Chile. Another September 11, which was the first September 11 in Chile, and the second September 11 here in 2001 in the United States. So we always talk about those two September 11, the way they affected to both countries, and not just to those countries, to the entire world. And when I talk about these subjects, for me it's very sort of emotional. When I see people being tortured, that the men we saw there in the documentary, I cannot avoid having my mind flying 40 years ago when I was being tortured, and the conditions that people in Guantanamo today are. In Chile we know exactly who were the responsible of that coup, and we know exactly that are here in this country. At that time, the Nixon administration and Mr. Kissinger were the ones that engineered, planned, organized, and led people in Chile to execute this coup. By the military, by the bourgeoisie in Chile, the one that executed it. But the responsible ones are here, which is totally different of September 11 here in the United States, where we don't still know who exactly are the responsible ones. We have people detained in Guantanamo where they say they are responsible, terrorists, whether they were the Taliban or they were Al-Qaeda at that time, but not even being members of those organizations. Most of the people detained in Guantanamo are people that are innocent, that didn't participate in anything. They are not members of any of those organizations. They were just taken, even some of them, being sold by their own people because the US government was offering between $5,000 and $50,000 for the head of one of those people that they thought they were Taliban or Al-Qaeda. And they are now in detention, still 11 years after in Guantanamo. Now let me tell you the sort of similarities. In Chile, we were tortured by people that were trained in the United States of America. The School of the Americas in Georgia today, at that time in Panama, are the ones that train. The School of the Americas are the ones that educate their officer of the army of different armed forces in Latin America. That's why it's called School of the Americas, where they train these people to go to torture, interrogation section in Chile or in any other country in Latin America. Basically, I am a survivor of two of those army officers, very young, that were graduated in the School of the Americas in 1973 when it was in Panama. Today we have thousands of those that are still in Latin America, especially in Colombia, where they have been trained, in Honduras today, where they have been trained in the School of the Americas and they are torturing their own people there. So we have people in similarity, those who want to torture us there, and the officer of the army that are torturing here in Guantanamo, probably trained in the same school. Another similarity, the construction of this military base there in Cuban territory, Guantanamo, was basically the same thing that we had 40 years ago. Very similar to the concentration camp in the time of the Second World War, when the Nazis kept Jewish and other people there in those concentration camps. Exactly the same kind of architecture, the same way they built them up to keep all prisoners there. So similarities are, we have hunger strikes there in Chile because we want to know the whereabouts of the people that have been disappeared. And we were demanding information, investigation, what happened to those people. More than 3,500 people disappeared from those concentration camps. And we still don't know their whereabouts. So we are inside those camps demanding for that. And obviously, one of the ways to do it was a hunger strike. And obviously we are punished the same way that people are punished today in Guantanamo. Torture and torture again for having been in hunger strike. Other similarities, isolation confinement, which is a huge campaign here in this country today to demand not more of isolation confinement, not just for people in Guantanamo, but everywhere in the jails, penitentiaries in the United States. There have just happened a case. The man just died after being 42 years in isolation confinement. But the press doesn't inform this thing. The regular press, the media, doesn't inform about this thing. Well, we have the same experience there in Chile. The press didn't inform about what was going on. We have children detained in those camps. You saw here in the documentary, children being detained also there in Guantanamo. They don't care whether they're children, old people, young people, they don't care. They just keep people there, again similarity, with no charge. I was for 2.5 years without being charged. The only reason they say because I was dangerous for the interior security of the state. The same thing that they have here in Guantanamo. All these people are dangerous, are terrorists. So they're dangerous for the society. We have to keep them there. We don't bring them in front of a court, in front of a judge. Same situation. So we have so many similarities in terms of what happened in Chile, but in many other countries in Latin America and in Africa too, that are happening here in the United States. Many years ago, probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, this country doesn't thought about torture. And if they learn about torture, well, because in those poor countries somewhere there in the world outside of the United States. Well, we learn now that the United States is responsible, the government, of the torture around the world, and here in the US. Even here in Chicago, Illinois Coalition Against Torture worked hard in terms of bringing John Byrd to be tried. John Byrd, the commander of the police in the 80s, where he sent hundreds of innocent men there to be detained after being tortured. Some of them are still in detention. Some others we have managed to get them out. But people should know about this. In Chicago, we have people in the police department that have been torturing US citizens, mainly black young people. And but the press doesn't inform about these things. So we are responsible, the organizations that work against torture, human rights, etc., the one that have to bring out the word, the one that have to inform, they have to be educating people. Hopefully we will do this not just in places like this, but also going to schools, high school, even elementary school. I've been able to talk in elementary school about human rights, and it's amazing how young kids can learn about, and it's basic education that they will have for their future. So we can go over and over the similarities that we have 40 years later here in this country. So we have to wake up from this thing. We have to do something. We cannot continue with the treatment that prisoners in general are receiving in this country and the people detained in Guantanamo. We have to close down Guantanamo now. We have been having this campaign after promises and promises from President Obama. The second day on his first term, he said Guantanamo will be closed. No more torture in this country. Well, after so many years, we still have Guantanamo open. We still have people being tortured in this country, especially in Guantanamo. And here we are. We have to be proactive. We have to be denouncing. We have to be participating in all these organizations that I mentioned before, that are working for human rights, that are trying to bring people to justice. Because that's the other word, big word, impunity. We know who are the responsible ones, but they're free walking out in the street. We know that government, in the past and in the present government, are responsible for what's going on in Guantanamo, are responsible for people being tortured. The health professional, the medical field, should know about the people participating in torture in those detention centers in Guantanamo. While I was detained, we have doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists that were participating in torturing us. And the medical association here in this country should take some kind of responsibility on that. They have denounced, yes, that force feeding, as we saw in the documentary, is torture. But do more. Bring all those responsible to justice. So no more a doctor, a psychologist, or any kind of other health professional person should participate in torture session and should be there trying to help, as they say, the people being tortured. No. Even we have priests that were in our camp at that time, trying to help us, but they were participating in the movement, in the machinery of being torturing people. We have the same thing here in this country. Some people, some religious people, have gone to Guantanamo. But what do? Nothing. So we have to wake up in this kind of things and participate and being strong in our demand and being strong in our denounce and being strong educating. Probably some of you here have a chance to educate young people. Do it. Go there. Talk to them. So thank you for being here. We are able to respond to some of your questions, if it's possible.
I just want to add a few points, I think in addition to what Mario was saying about the fact that the people responsible, the U.S. government officials responsible for setting up Guantanamo, for passing the Military Commissions Act, we know who they are. They need to be prosecuted. Next coming week, Dick Cheney is going to be speaking in Toronto. A group of Canadian lawyers are demanding that Canada either not allow him in because he's a known war criminal, or if he enters, he should be arrested and prosecuted. This goes on around the world. This week in Montevideo, there was a demonstration of force feeding in front of the U.S. Embassy that got big news in the press there. Eduardo Galeano, I'm sure some of you have read his works, Open Veins of Latin America. He was present at that force feeding. This is a big issue around the world, and yet most Americans, when we're down there every week, without fail, we have people stop and say, oh, I thought it was closed. Or, well, Obama really wants to, but he can't because of Congress. And just on that last point, let me read one paragraph from our New York Times statement that brings that up to date. The continuing torture at Guantanamo is part of larger and alarming developments. When he ran for office, Obama promised to restore the rule of law. Instead, he has claimed and exercised unchecked executive powers beyond what George Bush used. He refuses to prosecute officials for their use of torture, yet aggressively prosecutes any whistleblowers who expose war crimes, most flagrantly in the torture, slander, and draconian legal charges now, conviction of Bradley Manning. By signing the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, Obama made indefinite detention based on merely an accusation, the law of this land. These actions amount to institutionalizing and, in important aspects, escalating the Bush Doctrine. In the name of security, Obama has also implemented a policy of killing with drones across sovereign borders, deciding who will die by Hellfire missiles without charges, trials, or any evidence other than what only Obama and his closest advisors deem sufficient. I think it's really ironic to listen now to his claims as he was running for office that he was going to reestablish the rule of law and habeas corpus when he's actually gone farther and justified it, made it law codified and justified even more egregious violations of the most basic principles, not only international law. We're talking habeas corpus, the oldest principle of Western legal theory that exists. And he's actually gone further. So just his background, bringing it up from the Bush regime to Obama's administration. Questions, comments? Okay. You guys do?
All right.
Pat Butler has the first lucky question.
Yeah, aside from the 85 detainees who have already been cleared for release, the others, what were the circumstances under which they were captured? Were any of them taken carrying arms? Were any of them on or near battlefields? Were any of them connected with any unrecognized paramilitary organization? I ask this because much of this, the answers depend on whether they're covered by the Geneva Accords, which incidentally allow for the summary execution of partisans taken in arms. That's why I asked this question. It may be that we were easier on some of these guys than we were legally obligated to do. We are at war.
No, sir, the Congress has not declared war in 70 years.
When American troops are coming home in flag-draped coffins, we are at war.
No. Okay. We've heard your question.
Could you answer the
Yes,
question?
George Bush frame or...
We don't know much about some of these men. There are books here. The vast majority were not only not captured on a battlefield, they were turned in for bounty. Literally, the vast majority of them were turned in for bounty. The U.S. military dropped flyers all over Afghanistan saying, turn in a terrorist and you will get X amount of money that was beyond what most of these people would earn in a lifetime. That is the story on most of the people who went to Guantanamo. I have not read any stories of anyone who was caught on a battlefield or even with weapons. I don't know all of their stories. I would strongly suggest Andy Worthington has a blog online. He is a journalist. I have a video here of a film that he made, but he's a journalist who probably knows more about all of these individuals than anyone on earth. He's located in the UK. He's been writing about this for 8 years. You can go and there look at all the stories that he's been able to accumulate. Much of what we know about these men comes from Bradley Manning. Think about that. Bradley Manning.
Chelsea Manning.
Chelsea, thank you. Comes from the materials that were exposed in all of the records that she gave to WikiLeaks, and for which she faces decades in prison. Literally, we didn't even know. It was a huge struggle to even get American lawyers for these men. The Center for Constitutional Rights worked for years to even get lawyers for them. We just found out last week that the defense lawyers' communications have been wholesale given to the prosecution. This is a whole big story in the UK media, almost nothing about it here. Tens of thousands of communications between and among the defense lawyers and their clients. It's just one travesty after another of what these men have gone through. So it's very hard. That seems like a simple question. For most of these prisoners, the answer is no. A few of them, it's unclear. But there's a lot more. I'm not a walking encyclopedia, but I strongly recommend Andy Worthington's blog.
Just one more thing to add. You were mentioning the Geneva Convention. There's also something written by Andy Worthington that James explained.
Microphone.
And it says here. Okay, Mr. Verde. It says very clear here, when the Bush administration responded to the 9/11 by invading Afghanistan, a month after the attack, one of the first victims of the war on terror was the Geneva Convention under Article 5 of the Geneva Convention, and there is no doubt that all the status of prisoners seized in the wartime that could be protected, in this case in the United States, was not going to be applied. So, Geneva Convention doesn't mean nothing for the United States when they have these people detained there. The second thing is that the documentary shows very clear 700, more than 700 people detained after September 11. Well, we have only 160 today. All the other 600 were released because they have nothing that they could charge them. The 160 something that are there, they haven't been charged. So my point is, even if they were armed, even if they were detained as combatants, as they called it, and doubtful combatants, they called it, if they were detained during combat, well, bring them to justice. Try them. They haven't. Because they cannot. They don't have any reason to charge them. They don't have. So that's why we are demanding, well, release them then.
The Bulger.
My question is that isn't a lot of the reasons why they're still there, the reason they can't be released to their own countries or anything else, and that a lot of the reasons is the reason they're still there because their host countries or the places where they came from aren't taking them, and that one of the biggest reasons that Guantanamo is still open is that we at the United States won't bring them into our federal prison system? Can you please elaborate on this a little bit more? I mean, I keep hearing it's the United States' fault. Yeah, but we did get rid of over 600 men and releasing them already, and it seems like now they want to do it, but can't because of some bureaucratic obstacles in the receiving countries. Please comment.
I'll take a first stab at that. That is the common line that comes out of Washington. As a matter of fact, for instance, Shakir Amr that was shown on the film, he is a legal resident of the UK, and the UK government has, under a great deal of pressure, has said they would take him back. The United States refuses to release him, just as one example. 65 or 66 of the men still in Guantanamo are from Yemen. Obama has declared that he will not release any of them back to Yemen. Now, that has let the government there off the hook. They do not have to say whether they would or not because Obama stands in the way. Just pure and simple. That is not the government of Yemen refusing to take them back. That's mainly a fairy tale that is useful to Washington to say that. All the men who have been cleared for release, Obama could sign an executive order releasing them tomorrow. We have a lawyer here, Candace Gorman, who worked her tail off to find a country to take one of her clients. Switzerland agreed to take him. All they wanted was a request from the U.S., and the U.S. refused to issue it. She finally relocated him in Georgia, not at the U.S. Georgia that used to be part of the Soviet Union. She worked for months and years to find a place for him. That's how. Now, many of these 600 men, they were released as a result of outcry around the world. You know, the Australians, the other residents and citizens of the UK. It just became such a blemish for the U.S. And that's what we have to create that kind of a situation today. We have to create that kind of situation within the U.S. because it's just not true that most of them could not be released tomorrow.
Joe Mayer.
So what is the ultimate purpose of keeping them at in Guantanamo? Is it to show an example to other those who would dissent, or is it to keep a thumb in the eye of Cuba?
I think we can, elaborate so many ideas why they are keeping open still Guantanamo. And the gentleman before used the word bureaucracy. I think it's part of bureaucracy, part of political things. There's a struggle there in terms of trying to close NORNAC. You know that Republicans in general, and then the Tea Party of course there, they don't want to close Guantanamo. They don't. And the main reason is because, well, they're opposing whatever measure the actual government, headed by Mr. Obama, will do. I mean, whatever he wanted to do, they will oppose. But we think in the coalition that if Obama mainly responsible, he can do it. But he's afraid, in my understanding, he's afraid or scared of what the opposition to his government is going to do if they close Guantanamo. Because they can do it today. And the people that are there, 160 something, I'm sure they could be taken by countries around the world. We were just mentioning Switzerland, but it's also Sweden and other countries. Even I heard countries in Latin America, Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela. They are willing to keep people that are in detention centers in Guantanamo today. So they can close it tomorrow if they would like to, but it's not the political will to do it.
I think your point about a lesson to people around the world, especially Muslims, is true. I think there's a lot, that's part of it. I think there's not one simple answer to that. We, as part of World Can't Wait, we speak at high school classes, and a couple of years ago we showed excerpts from a film, Taxi to the Dark Side. It won the Academy Award for documentary in 2007 or 8. It's a fantastic film if you haven't seen it. And it's about a taxi cab driver in Afghanistan who was mistakenly arrested by the U.S. forces and tortured to death. We showed just clips of this to this high school class on Orr High School, which is on the far west side. This is not, your magnet school. These are not your kids college bound. And we said, well, why do you think the U.S. is doing this? And this kid at the back of the room raised his hand and he said, lynching. I said, what do you mean, lynching? He said, when they used to lynch black men in the South, it wasn't just to kill that man. It was to show everybody, this could happen to you. We can do whatever we want. And it gave me goosebumps. That kid just saw, right? He just made that connection. He saw that lesson and that's a lesson that the U.S., with all the wars for empire, needs to underscore. So I think that's they're not willing to close that.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Yeah, I came across this thing that my homeland Lithuania was assisting with the United States in apparently the detention and possibly torture of individuals. Is the government still outsourcing this?
Oh, did they have one of the black sites?
I mean, do they have other countries that are engaged in apprehending people? Are people still being detained in other countries, do you know?
I know that Obama swore off extraordinary rendition, but not rendition in a blanket way. Honestly, I don't know if they're still doing it. That's a really good question. I didn't know Lithuania was one of them.
Yeah,
Poland and Bulgaria and
I maybe it was Poland. That it?
No, there's more questions, I'm sure.
Gene?
you just said pretty much that the president is a liar. So I know the people that represent me as a citizen at the federal level. It's Senator Durbin, Senator Kirk, Representative Chakowski, and the president. And pretty much three of them are in league and the other one is Kirk. Is there any value whatsoever in writing a letter to these people and saying, close Guantanamo Bay?
I have talked personally with Judge Chakowski, and that she is willing to help in terms of putting some pressure to close Guantanamo. Whether she's really doing it or not, we have just to believe that she is willing to do it.
So it's
we have Senator Durbin, who has had a big, I would say, even campaign in Senate for isolation confinement, against isolation confinement. And at one point, he also said that if isolation confinement is being practiced there at Guantanamo, Guantanamo should be closed. I don't know about Kirk, never talked to him, and whatever other representative here in the Chicago area. But those are people that are very, I would say, significantly influencing some other Democrats. So it's true, we have to help more, probably try to work more with them so they can help in this campaign.
Thank you.
That's what I know.
Thank you.
Over here, Andy.
I would say educating your neighbors, friends, fellow residents of this country to raise their voices is even more important. And going all the way from the 80,000 plus, we don't even know how many people, mainly young Black and Latino men, but how many people are in solitary confinement in this country, which the UN Special Rapporteur for Torture has said that any longer than 14 days in solitary confinement is torture. And we have men, as Mario mentioned, Herman Wallace, who just died, who spent 41 years in solitary confinement. So we're talking all the way from, you know, Marion Prison in Illinois, all across this country, and Guantanamo. That's what that letter to the Revolution newspaper talked about. They gave the world an educational in American torture.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stand up, Andy.
So we're getting good here. My question is, are you familiar with the new book of Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow, where she's talking about mass incarceration as a profitable enterprise? And is it possible that people are being maintained in American prisons just for profit? And the other question I have, nobody's asked yet, is does anybody look at Guantanamo Bay as working extremely well to create ill will around the world for Americans, so that our government can keep saying they hate us for our freedoms, they hate us for our freedoms, we have to keep invading everybody because all these people in the world hate us? Well, Guantanamo is, I wonder if anybody else views Guantanamo as a place to create ill will.
Anybody ever answer that?
I am familiar with The New Jim Crow. I think it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Everybody should read that book. She puts together a whole lot of pieces that, you know, I was aware of, the different bits, but the portrait that she draws with those, I think, is compelling. She does point out that this mass incarceration actually precedes any privatization of prisons by decades. It really comes out of the 70s, the war on drugs. Now we have the war on terror. That was a very conscious response to the uprising of African Americans in this country, the demand for not only civil rights, but basic dignity and equality that this country has never, ever given to African Americans, and that the fear that the 60s put in the ruling circles, that systemic mass incarceration and all the legal steps that were required to institutionalized that was very much, starting from Nixon all the way through, very much a conscious response to that. So that's very on point. I would agree with you, the Michelle Alexander book.
Okay, let's see. Yes, in the back, I'm sorry. Daniela, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the gentleman mentioned Herman Wallace, and I know that we did rally around Bradley Manning, and there were marches, and there was a lot of things going on. But there is one more of the Angola Three who is still in captivity for the longest in U.S. history, 42 years. And his name has not been brought up. There are no marches going on for this African-American guy who is being, totally tortured. I was on WCBT just the other night. And I'm just mentioning that because I think there should be something organized for him. And the other thing is,
I think that when people start learning about the death of Wallace, start already thinking about what to do in order to bring out of jail Mr. I think it's Willock, so one of the Angola Three. Because it's true, I mean, with years after years, the mass media never inform about this situation. Just because of Democracy Now! Brought it back probably a week ago, they start learning about the situation of Mr. Wallace. Unfortunately, when he was released, after all that pressure, 3 days after that he died because he was suffering of liver cancer. So we don't want that to happen to Mr. Willock, who is still there. So I know that there are people organizing already demonstrations and campaigns to take him out of jail.
Yes, Tim.
Are you familiar with the work of Hernando de Soto in Peru and its Institute for Liberty and Democracy?
That's not a right. That's a crackpot libertarian.
No, I was just curious.
Crackpot libertarian.
Okay. Yes.
By the way, we had the Angola guy here years ago. One guy that got But my question is, and this goes back, and it kind of relates to what Butler was headed towards. Wasn't there there's still confusion? I mean, you talk a lot about trials, but in what court? And didn't the United States kind of make this up as they went along as to where this trials were going to be? And
actually, there's a film, if you all want to, we've shown it many times at Well Can't Wait. What is it, The Question? That's the name of it. It is a 30-minute documentary. Well, no, it's not exactly a documentary. 20 minutes is a reconstruction of one of these military commission hearings at Guantanamo based on, it's a compilation, but everything said in those 20 minutes comes from transcripts of those hearings. And it's just bizarre. I mean, it is making it up as you go along. And then it ends, well, I won't tell you the ending, but it's a great film that exposes the reality of those military commissions and leaves it open for discussion in a really good way. We've had some really good showings at libraries and stuff. And actually, the associate producer is here in Chicago, so it's easy to get your hands on it. I'm going to I think it's called The Question, The Response, that's it, because it's a response to 9/11. What should our response be? That's it, the response. But yes, the Military Commissions Act under George Bush really was a big, huge step in codifying torture in opposition to the Geneva Conventions and international law in general. And again, instead of repealing that, Obama has taken it even further. So what happens at Guantanamo is not anything like, however fractured our criminal system of injustice is, Guantanamo is a whole nother league apart. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yes, Andy?
You missed the other part of my question was, is Guantanamo and other torture centers being used to generate hatred in foreign countries? Because with the old Soviet Union, it is our friends now, supposedly. So the Cold War ended, we thought we were going to get a peace dividend in 1991. In 1990, and all of a sudden, we have the first war in Iraq. We've got to go fight terrorism. And, is anybody looking at it from the point of view that this whole concept of people that hate America is being created intentionally by American actions?
Well, I guess I would put intentionally creating fear higher up than, and usually I think people tend to hate the people that put them in that position of fear. Torture, Guantanamo is certainly part of that. I think drones, the ongoing wars against the people of Afghanistan, Iraq is completely devastated by what the U.S. occupation has meant to the people there. Libya, now we have 5 warships off the coast of Syria still to this day with Tomahawk and cruise missiles aimed at the people of Syria. And all of this justified by upholding human rights. I think if you look at what we saw tonight, that is so ludicrous. This country has no right to tell anybody, any country in the world, anything about human rights or international law. No way, I don't care what they do.
Mr. Fong, are you?
Okay.
Yes,
What would you like to see the U.S. policy be then towards anti-terrorism, and how would you handle the current problems around the world? Is there like a viable solution to what you're seeing? I know you're complaining about the Guantanamo Bay things, but when you actually look at the terrorist threat, it's still out there. They're still doing things around the world. What would you say would be the most effective way to stop this threat that we have, and how to handle it?
I think that the first thing that we'd like to see is that the United States of America is not intervening in any other country around in the world. It's not creating violence within the country to export that violence to other countries. And if we go with those two things, probably, because the whole thing about terrorism, the name is different, the word is different. In the 60s and 70s was communism. Now it's terrorism. But the way that characterize both sectors are the same today. So, and these were things created by their own government at that time, and these things have been created by this government today, by the Bush administration, and even continued by Obama. That all this terrorism around in the world, we are responsible, the United States. So the only way to stop it is if we stop exporting terrorism, if we export violence, and we take care from our own country here first.
Okay.
Well said.
Well said.
Yes.
Do you think there's ever a time or a place for United States intervention in a country for humanitarian reasons? Like, for example, in the case of the Rwandan genocide attack, should the United States have taken a military action in that case? So do we have to be more open to that as a possibility, and it's just a matter of the fact that particular cases have been bad in your opinion?
Personally, no. I don't think the United States ever intervenes for humanitarian interests. I think it's always a calculation driven by empire. What's to be gained from that perspective, and what other competing power might cut them off if the U.S. doesn't intervene. That's what drives these apparent disparities between real genocides, whether it's Rwanda or Congo, that can go on year after year after year. But that's fine because there are major interests involved there that are protected and furthered by that genocide. Versus horrible as it is, the civil war going on in Syria, that proposed intervention is not being motivated by humanitarian interests either. I was just reading in ProPublica that if you trace back the chemicals that we don't know yet, if we ever will, which party in that civil war actually used those chemicals, but the chemicals that Syria, the precursors to make chemical weapons that Syria has, came from the old Soviet Union, Germany, the UK, and France. That much we know. Where's the humanitarianism here, folks? And some of it could have been from the US too. So there are much different and bigger interests involved in calculations than humanitarianism ever when the US is.
Yes, Mr. Lee? Go ahead. You wanted to finish your question?
Oh, can I follow up? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a follow-up. It's a theoretical question. Then I do agree with you that oftentimes the interventions are not for humanitarian reasons, but in theory, maybe this is a little too theoretical, but should we get involved in things like Rwandan genocide and Congo, or just that should not be a policy that we ever consider?
I think in my remarks before was clear that we shouldn't go anywhere and intervene in any country, military, because we are creating more chaos. We are not there because of democracy or because of human rights. We are not in humanitarian purpose of any kind. It's just because always behind is an economic interest. And that's why we use the military to go there. So I don't think that we should ever go and intervene in any country. We can help probably with United Nations, we can help, even I don't believe totally in United Nations sometimes, but still, not because we are not the police of the world. And we believe that the United States of America, militarily, we should act as the police around the world. And we are not. And we are not supposed to be.
I have a question.
Just one last point on that. I think that I agree with what Mario was saying, and I think that there are real reactionary forces that are fighting the U.S. I think the Syrian Free Army sounds horrific. In terms of what Tim was saying, are there enemies of the U.S.? And absolutely. The more the U.S. intervenes, the more it strengthens, and the more we support the U.S. military fighting against them, the more it strengthens them. Supporting either one of them in that really reactionary dynamic only strengthens both of them. So I think the calls for U.S. intervention are, we're being played if we think that that's about helping anybody. Another thing we do with World Can't Wait, we go to high schools and we go with Iraq-era veterans against the war. And as we hear this from high school students, well, but isn't the military really helping? They're building infrastructure in Iraq. One of the guys just said, look, we are trained to kill. That's what we do. We don't help people. We're not the Peace Corps. We're not Doctors Without Borders. That is what the military does. And the U.S. military kills for empire. So that's what it's about, and when it goes in, that's what it's doing, and it is actually furthering, creating enemies and putting wind in the sails of the enemies that exist. So.
Now, I do have a question. Partly what you were saying, and partly what Mario was saying.
Louder, Brom.
Can't hear you, Brom.
All right.
Mumbling.
The excuse for acting as the world's policeman is that there isn't anybody else to do it. And is there a way of forward to establish a world constabulary, a responsible third party that would be able to intervene in and the internal affairs of Rwanda or of Syria or the United States or elsewhere. Is that a long-term possibility? And if so, how would we get there?
I think it's hard to respond to that question, but I believe that during the history of the world we have been able to create certain kind of organizations like United Nations, in our Latin America, the Organization of American States. But at the very end, the bottom line of all this is that there's always countries like try to monopolize what these organizations have to do around in the world. And one of those countries is the United States, because they have military, the potential possibility to do it, but at the same time because of the economy. Because all these organizations at the very end will respond to the interests of certain sectors of the society in those countries. Call it bourgeoisie, call it the rich people, call it whatever you want, that they are for their service, mainly that they're for the entire population. So in that sense, I mean, wherever it happens, and whatever the economic interest they would like to follow, they will use this organization. So I'm really very pessimistic that we can create other organizations, alternative to those, in order to put some kind of peaceful peace around the world, or try to intervene in some kind of humanitarian. Because the way that we have gone so far with this violent work, it's very difficult to stop it unless, as I said before, we stop it back from here.
The police enforce the status quo. What's the status quo on an international level? It's a status quo of empire. It's a status quo of unbelievable inequality and exploitation, where you have we have more slavery, outright slavery in the world today than ever before in human history, where families in Afghanistan, Pakistan, India are so impoverished and so in debt that they turn their children over as payment for their debt. This is documented. This is what these military might enforces and in many cases expands, the destruction of our environment. So if an international peace force, what's it going to do? Enforce those kinds of economic relations. And that's what has to change. That's what has to change. And that's going to have to come from the people. In this country, standing up, and around the world. That's where real change has always come from.
Okay, if I may follow up. Okay. Bram, over here.
Yes, Gary.
No.
Why do you think so many U.S. military personnel are
Just hold it for tomorrow.
Did everybody get the question?
No.
No.
Exactly, why do we think that so many military service people have been committed suicide lately? And I think it's a very broad topic about mental health in this country, especially with the people that are coming back from the war zone. Because you have to understand, I mean, I think that people being there, by the way they have to behave, by the way they have to act, they cannot be mentally stable. So the main reason when they come back here, either they commit suicide or they start shooting, as we have seen lately, whenever people get a machine gun and goes and start shooting and killing so many people because they are mentally sick. And the mental health system in this country, especially even now where we're seeing the discussion on the Congress, is going to be more and more, worse and worse if we don't put a stop to that and we take care of the mental health of this country, individually and collectively.
I think that's really a good question and really a big question. I think one part of it is the fact that these young people are going into the military thinking it's one thing, and they hit that reality that it's completely the opposite. People talk about an economic draft. There's actually a political draft. Kids think they're going in there to defend their country, to help people around the world, and the reality is so completely opposite of that carrying that with you. And then they live in a country that doesn't even recognize that there are wars going on. It's not like Vietnam. I mean, we're all old. We remember when Vietnam, and everybody knew somebody who was there or just come back. I mean, everybody, it would touch them. These people, I know I met a guy a couple of years ago who was back from Afghanistan and was going to Columbia College, and his arm was chewed up, visibly messed up, and he said, he asked a young woman out, and she asked him what happened to his arm, and he said it was the war, and she goes, what war? I mean, she had no idea. There are whole sections, I mean, I'm sure we all know people. So to be dealing with that weight and have so little support in society, of even recognition of it, I think, and not to mention all the drugs, self-medication, and the medication that the military puts on people. There are a lot of evidence that the inoculation for, now I can't remember. No, there's an inoculation that they're doing in the military that, there's another documentary of, this was on Point of View, that leads to, in some people, leads to psychosis.
All the shots they killed.
Yeah, this is a shot, but it was malaria. Yeah. Okay, the malaria, that's what it was. And this was, again, it just took a huge amount of fighting with the military to even get their own medical records out in public, lawsuits, it's been recognized, but still it goes on. So there's so many different factors, but I think that's some of it. The nature of the wars and the nature of this country and how we're not dealing with them, certainly.
Thank you very much. Do you need change, sir?
Got one more.
Yes. Andy?
Stand, Andy.
My question is, what can we do to improve grassroots educational awareness and get more people involved? As you said, it starts from the ground up. It's not going to come from Obama in the top down. It's going to come from millions of us reaching the point where, what suggestions do you have? What from your point of view, what can Americans do to move this awareness along faster?
I think that will be very important to start educating at the very young level. I mean, early days for the kids. As I said before, if you go to elementary school, grammar school, start talking about this, teaching kids. And not just at that level. I've been having experience of talking to people at the medical school, where mainly because of torture, we try to teach them how they should treat patients. That at the medical school, how they should treat patients or survivors of torture. And some of those kids, already at the medical school, they have no idea what torture is. And they're going to treat patients later. So at every level, for instance, at the medical school, I was discussing there, telling them, what about if you have a Human Rights 101? As you have many other 101 courses there, why not human rights? So they start learning from the very beginning what is human rights, what is torture, and in every other kind of violation of human rights, housing, clothing, feeding, etc., everything. And the only way is to educate kids. Because as we were talking about, I mean, people that doesn't know about the war zone, people doesn't know even the existence of Guantanamo, people doesn't know even today what torture means. So, and this is just because this education system here, it doesn't serve the purpose of training people or training kids, even young kids, in order to start learning about this. The only way that we can stop is by people being educated, but learning the consequences of all this at the same time. Today, I mean, you can see kids that Because of violence, they think that, I mean, human life doesn't mean nothing. Because they are exposed to hear every single day how many kids are killing to each other in the city of Chicago, for instance. So what more? It's nothing for them. But when we start telling them, we start educating them, teaching them about what that means, I'm pretty sure that the situation will change here in this country. Well, not just here, everywhere.
We have buttons here that say close Guantanamo now. You can take one, wear it. We have flyers. You can, on the back, there are websites. I'll make a pitch for The World Can't Wait. You can go there, sign up for our newsletter, and it will give you ideas every week of things you can do. Things that are happening here in the Chicago area and around the country. Become an advocate. As we say, we're out there every Friday from 4:30 to 5:30 at the federal courthouse, and we say, these men do not have a voice in this country except us. There's no lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for these men. We are their voice, and you all can be their voice as well. We typically have these flyers updated every week, and they will be posted on the Illinois, well, wait a minute, yeah, the Illinois Coalition Against Torture website. You can get in touch with us. We'll always have things for you to do. But the main thing is be an advocate wherever you are. We have...
And the flyer here that she was mentioning bring all the web pages.
All the websites are on that little half page. Andy Worthington gave World Can't Wait copies of his DVD, Outside the Law, Stories from Guantanamo, to support our work. You're welcome to have one. If you donate $5, we appreciate it. That's how we keep going. Show this. It will blow people's minds. If you're in a church, if you're in a Democratic Party, whatever groups that you're around, or you know people are, classrooms, get it out there. That's the way that we're going to raise a voice in this country for these people. And we, mainly the men in Guantanamo, were what led to Obama being forced to address it again on May 23rd. The word Guantanamo had not passed his lips in 3 years. And it was their heroism that brought that up. And people around the country forcing the issue. So that's on us.
One last question. Why did you get involved personally with this coalition? And can you give us a little background why you got involved with it? Either one of you, please.
Why we get involved?
Why you got involved with this first coalition?
Well, personally, as I said before, I'm a survivor of torture. For me, when I survived in those camps, we have a commitment that the people that have died in front of us, people that have been disappeared, wouldn't have a voice. We are responsible. We survive, we should act, we should inform, we should denounce, we should educate people and tell them what happened and tell them what is going on today in countries around in the world. One of them is this country. Okay. So that's a commitment that we made a long time ago, and that we're there trying to help, trying to stop violation of human rights, trying to stop torture particularly. Okay.
And how about you?
Well, I've been a part of The World Can't Wait practically almost since it was formed in 2005. And at that time, The World Can't Wait drive out the Bush regime. And we saw that Bush was putting into practice a whole different direction of much worse. I mean, not that I thought that the United States was some bastion of freedom and democracy, but that the rule of law was being actively torn down, and the secular foundation of this country was being attacked, what I call Christian fascism. And we said at the time that that which we do not resist and mobilize to stop, we will learn or be forced to accept. And that it's only going to be a massive outpouring from the people, and it's going to stop. politics as usual is not going to reverse this direction, and it has not. In fact, politics as usual, people who thought we were going to elect our way out of this, these wars for empire, we have gone further down that road. So I know that the only way we're going to stop this is going to be this kind of, all of this, the educational, the outreach, the demonstrations, etc. I'm just really happy to be in this coalition with lots of different people. It's not only the Illinois Coalition, it's Torture World Can't Wait, White Rose Catholic Worker, Voices for Creative Nonviolence. There's a number of us, and I think we've been able to make Guantanamo a bigger issue around here than it's been in years. And again, I think we were all inspired. This came together because of the hunger strike. And then now this summer, the hunger strike in the California prisons against solitary confinement was another inspiration. That's where that letter came from that I was reading from, that, you know, Michelle Alexander talks about a sea change in public opinion on these issues. And I'm just happy to have a way to contribute to that. It's a start, so.
Thank you. Let's see, Daniela has a question.
I was going to piggyback what Mario said in regards to the apathy that I can see as an educator of the youth. And if I look around at the age group here, I don't see too many young people. And they are the people that are going to carry the torch and move forward. And how to get to them, I think, is the key issue. If they can't read, they're not going to get involved in these issues. How do we do it? How do we get them to focus on torture issues and humanitarianism when they're so concerned about their own little area? I think that's really key, and it's not happening in any of the groups that I'm in. They're all older people.
As a federal employee, I know all about apathy.
As I was saying before, I think that the key to here is to start educating at the elementary school, grammar school, going to high school, and even colleges later is the only way. We have seen this, in every event that we have, in every meeting, we have probably up to college kids, and then probably people that are over 45 years old. I mean, the gap there between the 25 and 45 is pretty clear. And you have many reasons. People are graduating, they're having their families, they have no time to work and participate. And sometimes it's not that they don't care, it's just that they are not active there. But we have to bring them over. We have to go, that's why the important thing to go to even young professionals organizations. Even more, Amnesty International today has created here in Chicago a section with young professionals so they can start going to their own professional field, let's say, to talk about, to educate people. So we have to do all this in every single level. But we have to put more emphasis now, as I said, in young kids, in adolescents, and teenagers, and then going to college.
I can just say too from the World Can't Wait that the whole transformation, devastation of the Chicago public school system has also included, it's also resulted in it being every year it gets more difficult to talk to the high school students. We have a harder time getting in. Teachers, fewer and fewer teachers have tenure, and if you don't have tenure and you bring somebody like us in, they get in trouble. We go to the Teachers for Social Justice Curriculum Fair, and every year I hear over and over again from young teachers that they are blacklisted, that they raise their voice. There is such a clampdown in the high schools, and our experience has been, like I was talking about, it was Orr High School, where the kids said it's like lynching. These kids are so interested and so alert and so questioning that to talk to them as thinking human beings, you get a response. I mean, the hands go up way more than you guys. I mean, they're just, and they all have their opinions, and it's so lively, and important. Meanwhile, Chicago public schools are the most militarized system in the country. We have more military academies. We have recruiters have offices in the high schools where they don't have the academies. I mean, they are all over the place. And to try to get in there and give even on an alternative it's really difficult. So if you know teachers, support them, help them in any way. We have a program called We Are Not Your Soldiers. WeAreNotYourSoldiers.org is our website. There's an initiative of World Can't Wait where we go with the World Can't Wait and anti-war vets to the high schools. You can help that, support that. Let teachers, we also go to after-school youth programs, to church youth programs, anywhere where we can talk to young people. I agree with you completely, and we're, well, any suggestions and invitations are real, we'd love to hear.
The microphone had a question.
Well, let's follow up on what she was bringing up.
It's our comment.
Yeah.
Let's go
to rebuttals.
All right. He's had his question.
He's got no questions.
Let him finish, Charlie. He's standing up. Go ahead.
This question.
All right. Question of student apathy and even student ignorance.
Why should I let him finish?
We're all older here, right? And I just turned 65 a couple of weeks ago, okay? I was in the thick of the Vietnam thing. I was a student reporter at Medill during the height of the student strike and the Cambodian uproar and everything else, okay? It was a time to be alive. It was a time to experience history, to actually live it, witness it. I was trained to be a journalist at the time. I ended up being not a journalist, but a professional practitioner of media. My first career was in advertising and broadcasting, and advertising and marketing and the whole bit. I am now 65 years old. I am a dinosaur, okay? I'm hip to the principles of media, but the new stuff, I am clueless, okay? I see Twitter, I see Facebook, I see websites, I see everything out there, and it's beyond me, okay? Oh, I can get up to speed, but I'm in other directions right now. I think what you gotta do is not the total solution, but you, as older folks, we as older folks, have to get media savvy to the new stuff.
What's the question?
The question is, why don't you get someone in your camp to start a new social media revolution that's going on here? Because the kids are married to their smartphones now. That's how you reach them.
Actually, Illinois Coalition Against Torture and Chicago World Can't Wait are on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We do that. We're actually two of the probably most active local groups, grassroots. We're all volunteers too, but I couldn't agree with you more. And we're doing it. We're learning how to do it. And you know what? You're never too old, okay? When people tell me that, I mean, I'm almost as old as you. People my generation, I said, forget that. Forget that. It's like as if remember back the mimeograph machine and the Xerox came in? You go, oh, I'm not going to use that because I know how to use a mimeograph. Come on. I mean, this is just, we can learn this stuff, okay? I don't know how many, there are 800 million people on Facebook. If you want to be on, it's got to be pretty easy, okay? If grandma's on Facebook, we can manage that. So, you're right, we have to be there. And actually, among poorer people, they're more likely on Facebook because they don't have internet access. They got their phone. That's another reason if you want to reach the most oppressed in the society. Actually, smartphones and Facebook and increasingly Twitter is a more direct avenue than the websites and the email. They're on their smartphones.
Somebody who's going to be 77 very soon, I'm greatly encouraged.
Let's go to rebuttals, Brom.
Right. Rebuttal.
Thank you. Thank our speakers one more time.
All right. I want to know how many of you want to say something to the rest of us. And I hope that we'll have time for everybody to get, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
We're about 4 minutes from.
Okay. 4 minutes. Yeah, 4 minutes. Okay.
I'll keep time.
And Tim will keep time. Thank you.
Let's get up there.
All right. Joe Mayor. Oh, our system is to come up here and grab one of these chairs. And the waiting line.
Are you through making noise?
There's another chair there,
Okay.
I want to thank our speakers for a wonderful presentation. It was inspiring, frightening, and encouraging at the same time. But our speakers had it right. Empire is the problem. Throughout history, human history, empire has always done what we are doing today. And it's tough to end that, but it can be ended. Following World War II, the United States was a dominant economic power, and it intended to remain that way. So we established, quote, the Marshall Plan, which allowed war-torn Europe, with its decimated buildings and cities, to spend US dollars, which we gave them, only on American goods. It was a marvelous concept. We give you the money, but you have to buy from us. It's great. They weren't finished. The Cold War began shortly after that. So the United States led the charge to form NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It had 2 goals in mind. One was to push the Soviet Union back to its borders. That didn't work. The second goal was to create a complex of military organizations to put down insurrections in any country that where insurrections would rise. For example, if you had a rise, a workers' rise in Hungary, for example, you would bring in Lithuanians to put it down, not the Hungarian soldiers, because they might empathize with their own Hungarian people. So you brought in Germans to take care of the French. You brought in Italians to take care of the Austrians and so forth. It's a very, very clever system, all organized by the United States as a prelude to the empire which they were building now.
One national thing I would suggest would be, or at least comes to mind, although President Obama doesn't deserve much praise, that's for sure, but one thing he said was, I'm going to go to the Congress and get the Congress to approve what he was going to do. I think that would be a good idea. I want to say that I didn't vote for President Obama this last time, and I'm glad. On the bigger level, or a little bit bigger level, I am by accident the chair of the Second Unitarian Social Justice Council. We do have a prisoner solidarity part, so we are concerned about this particular issue. So I'll bring this stuff to the Social Justice Council as I can. And also, I like the presentation because they suggested a couple of specific things I can do. They said it was worthwhile for me to send a letter to Representative Chakowski and Senator Durbin, and probably another one to the President saying, why don't you listen to these 2? And the other things they said was, it's going to be hard for me to resist. I think I'll be out there at least once. Hey, if nothing else, the people here, you're really interested, You can wind up there next Friday for an hour and stand with them. I may not go beyond that, but I'm going to do at least 1 hour. That's better than nothing. I found the presentation very depressing.
Oh, no.
Very, very depressing.
Not at all.
Thank you.
See, I got you a recruit. You owe me $5.
I'm Michael Foley. Torture is not about the person being tortured. Torture is about the torturer. Torture is about us, because we are the torturers. Now, the tortured person suffers pain, whatever way you want to characterize it, horrible pain, unimaginable pain, unspeakable pain, unbearable pain. Sometimes if the guy's lucky, he'll die from it. If he's not so lucky, he's got to live with it for years and years and years while it's being going on. And even if he's lucky enough to get released, he's got to live for the rest of his life with the memory of what has happened to him. And quite likely, permanent physical disability, aside from the emotional disability. But we are the ones that are inflicting this torture on these people, not just at Guantanamo. We've been told by our government that the CIA grabs terrorists all over the world and sends them off to Egypt and to Syria because they got good torture guys over there that really know how to torture and blah, blah, blah. We are the ones that are torturing people all over the world. When I say we, I mean every adult in the United States of America, including me. It's our politicians that do it, it's our government that does it, and we are the ones who pay for it. Now, the vast majority of people in the United States of America actually love what's going on in Guantanamo. Yes. They keep re-electing the same politicians that have been doing it. The politicians have given us this system, and they keep getting re-elected, and the vast majority of people in this country vote for Republicans or Democrats, and they're the ones that are doing it. The people of the United States of America really love all this torture BS that's going on. Yes. Now, the only other thing I want to say, it's a personal thing, the woman who was speaking here, Jay Becker, I think well of her. I admire Jay Becker. Beaker, excuse me, I admire Jay Beaker. I first met her in 2005, that's 8 years ago. And for the last 8 years that I know of, she's been standing up to the American Empire and speaking out against the American Empire. And I think well of her for doing that. I'm not a friend of hers. You know, I've had a lot of words with a lot of people, and I've had words with Jay Becker, and she and I don't get along. In fact, Jay despises me, but that's okay. Jay has been standing up to the empire and speaking out against it for 8 years that I know of, and I think well of her for doing that. That's all I got.
First off, I find it interesting, to say the least, that our speakers on several occasions cited concerns raised by the United Kingdom over our alleged use of torture. This is the same United Kingdom that used force feeding and waterboarding less than 15 years ago in several of their prisons, including Long Kesh, the notorious H Block, where these same tortures that they are denouncing today were being committed in Her Majesty's name over there. But of course, nothing was said about that. However, now let's move on. All right, I'm against torture, as any reasonable human being is, at several levels. Not the least of which, it produces no results. I have had individuals in certain professions tell me that they could, if given the time and the wherewithal, get anybody in any room to confess to the assassination of Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy, if given the opportunity and the orders to do so. torture produces nothing in the way of useful information, which is theoretically what they claim to be using the torture for. I do wish that the speakers would stop equating, however, Guantanamo with Auschwitz and Buchenwald. It is an insult to the many thousands of people, millions of people who died in those camps, and their relatives who live today without families, only nightmarish memories. It's a trivialization. Say what you will about Gitmo. Gitmo is not Auschwitz. There were no gas chambers there. There are no furnaces there. It is a very unpleasant place, and I'll be the first to agree that the 85 people who have been cleared for release should have been put on planes long ago and sent back anywhere but the United States. But sent back, they do not belong there. I am concerned, however, about the status of the people whose backgrounds are a little bit murkier, because I would not want to see people held at a place like Gitmo, which can be graduate schools for terrorism, and I would not want to see them turned loose to rejoin their own old outfits and continue on, only this time better trained than ever. So I am a little bit concerned about the release of some of these people. There are others whose cases should be examined. They should be sent home as quickly as possible. Our government is trying to save money. Economic reasons alone would dictate that if we don't close Gitmo, we at least cut down the population. I'm speaking from very practical points of view, because these are the arguments that the powers that be tend to listen to. They really do. I also find it amusing that our speakers were constantly referring to the ends of empire. We don't do empire well. The fact of the matter is, we have not done empire well in a long time. So perhaps let's not dignify some of our poorly conceived policies as being done in the name of empire. If so, then we're more incompetent than I would like to think. We do need a close look at what's going on at Gitmo. On the other hand, just because a person is there does not mean he is innocent. We need to examine each case by case by case. I also didn't have a chance to ask, although I am curious, how many of the inmates at Gitmo are American citizens. Now, if these were American citizens taken in arms and taken on a battlefield fighting with the enemy, I think we know what the answer is as far as their proper treatment is concerned. We need to
Bring
discuss
charges.
that. Bring charges, yes. Then try them, and then do the penalty which is appropriately given for treason. But they haven't been accused of anything. Charge them, punish the ones that are guilty, set an example to the world, and get on with it. We're allowing ourselves to be used as the scapegoat of the world. And in fact, tonight, our speakers kind of weakened their arguments by equating Gitmo with American prisons, by equating Gitmo with German concentration camps, by equating Gitmo with any number of nasty places and nasty situations. I've been just given the cutoff point. Fact of the matter is, let's not mix all of these issues together. They're not the same issue. Let's focus on Gitmo, deal with that, which was not done tonight, and move on to other things if we must. Thank you.
Hi, I agree with that.
let's not, confuse Gitmo with a normal prison where people that have committed crimes are being held. As I said before earlier, Gitmo is one half of propping up the myth, the total fairy tale myth of 9/11. You have this book, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, and dozens of others like it, hundreds of thousands of reports all over the world. The latest article, I told you, there's 2 articles in this white flyer. I made enough of these for everybody. This is Philip D. Zelikow, the myth maker behind 9/11 and the War on Terror. 9/11, the event known as 9/11 was created and sold to the American people with the full complicit participation of the American media. 3 big towers in New York were demolished. 2 of them went sideways in the wind as a cloud of dust. None of the destruction in New York was done by 19 lucky Arabs with box cutters. That was the story that was sold to America, and then they sent people over to Afghanistan with truckloads of cash saying, we got $5,000, do you have somebody you want to turn in and get rid of, and we're going to send them to Gitmo. We got a prison to stock to make it look like we're holding the terrorists that were responsible for 9/11. Kevin Barrett has produced another, I've got a few of these things, but Dr. Kevin Barrett is an editor. Somebody mentioned a site called Veterans Today. There's Veterans for 9/11 Truth, but Veterans Today is a site run by Gordon Duff. He publishes a lot of articles on false flag operations. They suspect now that the gassing done in Syria was a false flag operation to try to get the U.S. military involved in there. And anyway, Kevin Barrett makes the point that he said when you have a myth of human sacrifice going on, the myth can be punctured and put to rest if the people that are involved in the human sacrifice just stand up and say, we're not going along with the program anymore. And that's what a bunch of Muslim Americans did in a march on Washington on September 11th. And it was a huge success because they stood up to the hate mongers at Fox and everybody else and said 9/11 is a myth, and 12 years is long enough to have that myth driving all the bad foreign policy that's coming out of the United States. So for those of you that can only buy 1 book a year, I highly suggest getting a copy of Censored News from Project Censored. I've been getting it every year for 20 years or so. Barnes & Noble will have it in the stores. October 8th is the publication date. The new issue will be 2014. Censored 2014 comes out in October. For those of you that are interested in learning about 9/11, the 2011 edition had probably 80 pages of reports, documents, and everything else dispelling the whole myth. And as our speakers said tonight, the American press doesn't talk about these things. I mean, you can have somebody say, how'd you hurt your arm in the war? What war? I mean, the American people are being maintained in a state of terrifying ignorance on certain subjects. And most people are blissfully ignorant. There's 3 stages. There's blissful ignorance when you've never been exposed to the information. There's what's one climate expert from Australia, he slams the politicians down there for willful ignorance. Willful ignorance is when you're pretending not to see or understand evidence that's all around you, evidence of a crime. And willful ignorance can be prosecuted as obstruction of justice. We have people in this audience, I won't mention any names, you probably know who you are. People will come up here at the podium and say, 9/11 was done by 19 guys with box cutters. After they've attended 4 of my talks and others, the evidence is overwhelming. So far, I haven't heard anybody come up to the podium and say, the Catholic Church doesn't have any problem with pedophile priests. No, there's no pedophile priests there. You have Holocaust deniers, but they usually don't get to a podium for very long because people stand up and say, that's willful ignorance. And when people are dying, Americans are willfully ignorant of what our tax dollars are being used for. The American military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about is the largest killing machine on the planet. The largest purveyor of terrorism in the world is the U.S. military. There's no other way to say that. It dwarfs the activities of everything else. So I'll just make a couple of quick points. As Charles Ferguson was talking about in his book, Predator Nation, the U.S. right now is running the greatest welfare for the rich system that the human race has ever seen. We're shoveling money to billionaires in amounts that have never been seen. We're in our 13th year of Bush-Cheney crimes against humanity. Obama was elected telling us that he was going to change things. I'll wrap it up quick. We're in our 13th year of Bush-Cheney crimes, and the solution, one climate scientist, the consensus from scientists all over the world about big problems like this came out of, anybody wants a copy of this, a climate scientist said, if our children, little children that are here now, if they have a planet that's livable for humans, it's because the adults here now, all of us, we disabuse ourselves of the notion that we're going to pass these problems on to the younger generation. No, if the younger generation has any hope of surviving, we have to get our act together and move and do something now. I don't care if you're over 60, over 65. Yeah, it's time. So if anybody stands up here and says they think 9/11 was done by Al-Qaeda, I'll tell them to their face, you're terrifyingly ignorant of basic reality. And you are terrifyingly ignorant of several things. I'll tell you that to your face.
Who did it? Who did it?
Who's next?
I'm going out, well, I'm not going to say that capitalism is the solution to everything.
No.
No, it's not. I will say, though, that I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to live in this country. I like its freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of association, and constitutional guarantees of freedom. The mere fact that we're meeting in this restaurant, criticizing our government and blasting the state, we couldn't do this in a lot of countries today still, but a lot more are letting us do it than we did 50 years ago. I still believe that the world is getting to be a better place. And I believe that that major force that's doing it is globalization, is communication, is the spread of technology, is the spread of economic just basic economics, and you can see it in the trends, Charlie. 300 years ago, the whole damn world was poor. We have seen the rise of the Industrial Revolution. We've seen the rise of many things. And like I said, global capitalism and its economic forces do, for the most part, are a chance for good. They do have their problems, and I'm not going to sit here and deny that they don't. We do have a state that's a little overzealous on security right now. We do have things that go wrong in the United States. But I really think on the whole, our country is still the last bastion of freedom. The beacon to those who are sitting on a hill that want to come here. After all, people still want to come here. They still want to better their lives. And every single day, you still see people opening businesses. You see people freely associating with each other. You see economic activity going up. And frankly, there's more countries today that are democratic than there was even 50 years ago. You think that this rise of these global corporations are crazy? Well, I still think that the biggest contributor to not the greatest invention in the world in the last 35 years has been the fiber optic cable. Why? Because it's allowed millions and millions of people to communicate via the internet, via the whole bit, and it's made it cheaper for political organizations to communicate with one another. Every time you have people communicating and talking, they're not picking up guns. They're not going at each other's throats. Yes, we do have problems. Yes, we do have things. But just like what happened in Northern Ireland, they finally turned the guns down. They came together to form a government. and they started cooperating together, and watch how fast terrorism went away. You got countries, and thank God we're finally seeing the spread of capitalism in America. And what I was talking about in Peru a little earlier, there's a gentleman, his name was Hernando de Soto, wrote a book called The Mystery of Capital, and why certain poor countries remain poor and certain rich countries remain rich. And the reason is because of the rule of law, the establishment of property rights, the ability for businesses to get things done, the ability for the common man to get a mortgage and a loan, and of course, with that, responsible government, responsible politicians, and no corruption. And frankly, you know, we may be talking a lot around the world today about all the problems, but there are a lot more countries today that are stable, that are democratic, that are running things right than there ever has been in all of human history. And yes, we may have things like climate change, like our addiction to fossil fuels and things like this, but it's only a matter of time before we finally get that magic fuel that I've talked about before in here called thorium. Probably what will happen is we'll have a bridge fuel with natural gas. And by the way, the United States is producing more energy than it ever has in the last few worlds. Anyway, I'm getting close. Well, Charlie, that'll become economically unviable in the next 30 to 40 years, and you'll need to replace it with something. And that something is going to have to be some form of nuclear power.
Burning water.
But anyway, I'm rambling. I've said more than enough. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be living under our capitalistic system. I'm proud to say to myself, you know, hey, I'm just very happy to be here and glad to see that the world situation is moving a lot more positive than negative. Thanks.
I'm up here primarily to thank three people. The two speakers. I'm impressed with the gentleman that was in a hurry, had to leave. The speaker, he is a victim of torture. He is a victim of torture. And when he speaks with more authority and credibility, at least appealing to somebody like me. This lady, outstanding speaker, she got passionate about what she's doing, and she's consistent, coherent, and explain her mission. Now, I ain't worried about the kids, I'm worried about these old folks. That you can throw a little silver dust in their face and they forget every goddamn thing. Now, my country, right or wrong, when wrong be made right. I don't know no other goddamn country. I was born and raised here.
Yep.
If you lie to me once, you lie to me again.
Yep.
If I had 4 hours in 4 months, I could tell you the goddamn lies that my country have told me. I'll mention one real quick. Iraq got some weapons of mass destruction. The biggest lie in the world. Now, like I said, if I could talk real fast, like the Brazilian dance, if you ever seen that Brazilian dance, they be dance real fast. If I could talk that fast and I had 100 years, I couldn't tell you, not 100 years, give me 100 months, I couldn't tell you the lies that I know about my country. Now, why should I be in denial? Oh, I'm supposed to, oh, you in denial because you hate your country. Hey, this is my motherfucking country. I was born here.
Good.
But to sit up here and talk like Jim Borgia, talking about how sweet it is and they ain't never did nothing, and sit around and say, oh, we is a humanitarian country. If you're doing wrong to folks, we go over there. That's the official version, people. That's where that does come from. Make you forget about that. If you were so concerned of human rights and justice, you would start in your own country. And a brief word on torture. Torture is for your people. Torture is not to intimidate the man you touching, because if he's innocent, he hates you and he ain't thinking about what you gonna be or he gonna be days from now. This is to play on the people you control, and that is the United States citizenship. That's who the government opposes. Same way with the death penalty. Who you think that they doing that for? For the public, or a segment of the public. Not all of us, or some of us don't let that little dust get in their face. So I want to see some grown-up, that's the older one, not the kid, be like Saint, what's his name, in the Bible. They say, I once was a child, I thought as a child, I spoke as a child, and so forth. They come, say, it's taking me 40 years to get over the shit that I love. Of the poet, Khalil Gibran. He said, give children your thought, your love, but not their thought, for they have their own thought. But people, when you hear somebody say, or the government said, well, I'm doing this for this reason, I'm doing that for that reason, anybody can play on your ignorance, anybody can play on your fear, anybody can play on your stupidity. That's their budget. Grow up like St. Paul did. That's who I'm thinking about. You ain't no goddamn child. Tell him to take that propaganda and the bullshit and stick it up his ass.
Yeah.
Here comes Jesus.
Yeah. How to make peace.
Jesus.
Yeah, I first learned because I was beginning to ask, how do you make peace? You know, Jesus, I became a Christian in my teens because I'd been brought up in a Christian Science Sunday school, and I'd had a good agnostic father who had imparted a little of his agnosticism to me, and he was a fallen away Presbyterian, and a mother who was a Christian Scientist, and my grandmother too. And my grandmother, thank God, she was a saint. She was an intelligent, hardworking, self-sacrificing, cheerful, outgoing, patient, kind person whom I wanted to be like. She was something of a witness and a model for all of us. And, she went out of her way for people who were hurt. And maybe the speakers tonight are representing groups that want to go out of their way a bit for people who are hurting. And I think that we could all learn something from that. And maybe once you get into looking out a bit for other people, one thing leads to another, and you find that not everybody is looking out for other people, but maybe more to do other people. So when you look around for what makes for peace, you find that peacemakers very often find themselves being tortured, being persecuted, being mocked and oppressed, run out of town, like Jesus. So it's not an easy road, and you need to take that road with a little bit of caution, but take it. When it comes to the myths of 9/11, yes, there are lots of myths of 9/11. Some were used to promote an invasion of Afghanistan and later of Iraq, and some are being used to condemn the Bush administration or to look for, what is it, the nameless forces projections on buildings, but whatever you find from all the literature that L.P. Anderson has assembled on 9/11, you're going to have to say, well, what is the myth that you believe? And what is it? So what? You know, some people never saw war by their country that they didn't like. God bless them, patriotic people, because, you know, the solidarity that we have as Americans or as anybody, you know, can commit us both to good and to blind paths of destruction. Let's hope that our paths are not so blind.
Now we don't have to go to church, huh?
Amen. I'm glad that Charlie...
Did you hear they shut down, they shut down all the government buildings and military bases? You know, they kept the chaplain out from giving Sunday services at one military base. They're upset. Anyhow, a few announcements I forgot. If you look at this week's Reader on page 20, there's a little story there about the early days of the college complexes, which I was surprised to see. Also, I forgot to announce at the end of the month, we have an auxiliary group that deals with philosophy, and we put together a conference, and that's going to be at the end of the month, probably at Columbia College, I think on the 24th and 25th. We do Friday and Saturday. All right, thanks. First of all, I want to thank you for your presentation, and thank Ramon, and thank you for your efforts to bring some justice to this situation, if I'm going to be eclectic as usual here. First of all, Mr. Butler, having a murky background isn't sufficient, isn't just cause for incarceration and torture. I don't know. Well, where did it come from? We had an incident, and let me retreat a little bit. In '98, I put together an academic conference on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the 50th anniversary. And yes, I was proud of our country because we had historically preserved human rights, unlike any other country. And we tried our best to have due process and things in that. And there have been some cases, I know about the Civil War and things like this, and World War I, and fear of the people not being patriotic and apprehension. But for the most part, we were doing pretty good. But something happened after 9/11, and we went kind of nuts. And that's where you had all those discussions of liberty versus security. And you trade off your liberties for public safety. And yeah, people, and you talk about the media, yeah, this was an event people could see, and this had an effect on people. Let's face it, I mean, when I saw that happening,
there was no one who could remain immune to that. But what was our response? Well, we had guys and we gave them all kinds of money, and we said, why don't you go around the world and see if you can pay people, put a bounty out and give a reward if you can hand in everybody who has a murky background. And then we began apprehending them, and not settled with that, we thought maybe we should torture them a little bit if we didn't have sufficient evidence or basis to, I don't know, and then we began to set up a parallel judicial system, which we were making up. Should it be military or should it be civilian? Things like this. If you get into this area, there's certain legal areas depending on what the issue is. So now we set up a whole new standalone kind of thing, I guess. But it was like a Salem witch trial on a universal scale. And then there are other things like Patriot Act. There were some of us that were concerned about that because the Patriot Act was unlike these others in that it was aimed towards the domestic population. That was the one that, and we still keep the group together as a matter of fact, but that struck me as being the real threat to our thing. I mean, I was concerned about it being a librarian that we had to turn over records. As a matter of fact, I was director of circulation of a library system, large one, that you would have to turn over what books individuals read. I said, this is the basis for taking action against somebody, what books they read, you know. I mean, everybody in this room, as far as I'm concerned, looking at you guys, you all got murky background. And I've got to defend you too, and I always pick on Butler. But Butler is incredibly wrong about this thing, Auschwitz and all that. In 1933, the German nation began apprehending any civilians who they thought were murky characters. And this was not kept secret. And they actually had documentaries they showed in those days in the movie theaters. And that's what they called them, concentration camps. And they set up little new prison system in the nation and apprehended people on a whole new legal basis. They didn't have any laws established, but they said we have to apprehend these people. And they actually they showed movies. They said, well, we're not really bad, we're not really mean, you know, but if you went to the movie theater and you saw your neighbor in a prison camp, you'd think twice about talking out against the authorities, you know. So yeah, it grew from there. Anybody who studied the German situation knew that it was incremental in what they did. They got away with things, and then it got a little more and a little more and a little more. It's an incredibly incremental process. And it shows you how sometimes things can get away. Yeah, what are we doing? Sending out people, I don't know who, apprehending individuals at large around the world. And then we set up a prison in our own. And then, like, we've got an enormous prison industrial complex, but we figured we'll use a new one. I don't know why you wouldn't fit into the regular system. You're thrown into some quasi kind of new one. And then we had the other situation with the prison where they had the things in overseas. So it's not surprising that conditions are not going to be pleasant in these things. What was the one where they had the girl and mistreating the prisoners?
Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, we had the guy here. His family owned that land and all that. Anyhow, that's just basically my views. But as for the U.S. being the last bastion of freedom, as my learned friend here would like to believe. That's called a grand falloon. And what is a grand falloon? Kurt Vonnegut came up with this concept. That's a simple little untruth that makes people feel better. Something like prosperity's right around the corner. Anyhow, thank you very much. Give them a few bucks, and they have their things on Friday, so hopefully we can get you some recruits there. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong now, in Germany.
I
know he's kind.
The Vonnegut word you wanted was FOMA. Grand falloon is a bunch of people.
Oh.
Who's timekeeper?
That's, I'm watching it like.
Would you give me a 1 minute warning?
Yes, I will.
Because I've got more than enough to shoot people with. Somebody talked about war at war. Well, what's going on at Guantanamo, which the last couple of people didn't get around to mentioning, is utterly illegal aside from being an utter disgrace. We are not legally at war. Please reread the Constitution. This alleged torture, using phrasing like that, should embarrass whoever does it. That's like saying the alleged marriage between your mother and father. It's pretty well documented, it's pretty well witnessed, and don't go there. And I don't know where the Nazi thing came from. I didn't hear that. So somebody said, well, if we send those people home, they could be killed because it's dangerous to send them home. That has nothing whatsoever to do with the disgraceful, inhumane treatment they're receiving at our hands, or the hands of our, quote, our government. I cannot see the logic in figuring out that somehow the abuses at Guantanamo are a conspiracy to discredit the United States. I really doubt that the United States military is trying to discredit the United States. Blowback is discrediting the United States. The United States overthrew the government of Iran 50 years ago. We do have some lingering problems as a result of that. A couple of years before, the United States had helped overthrow the government of Syria, and there's a longer list, but those are some from the front pages. Somebody said, handle the current problems around the world. Why us? What makes it the United States' job to solve all the problems in the world? We've got a few problems here we could really give some work to. Where are the young people? Well, a third of people in their 20s are living with their parents because they can't afford not to. People are graduating college with an average debt of $25,000 or $30,000 before they're out there looking for the jobs that aren't there. The war on education has made tremendous advances and continues to make tremendous advances. Right here in Chicago, there's the effort to turn the job of teacher into unskilled day labor. I really don't want that for our posterity. Freedom of the press, get real. The mass media in the United States are owned by an oligopoly of 6 corporations. Multi-billion-dollar corporations. And I have never heard of a multi-billion-dollar corporation that was liberal. Liberal media is a unicorn farting rainbows. Show me a few and I'll believe it. The first one won't be enough. If you want to find out just how free your speech is, start making a difference. And then you'll know. Dr. King was vilified and pilloried for years.
Then he started looking farther afield, and in addition to race, he started talking about class, and a year later he was dead. Malcolm X and Barry Goldwater were the two highest paid public speakers in the United States in the year 1964. Malcolm X, who went through a whole lot of changes and never stopped learning and never said he knew enough, he had the answers, moved beyond race and started talking about class, and a year later he was dead. So, I mean, some Marxist intellectual, I think it was, came up with what he called repressive tolerance, and that is one of the true geniuses of America. You can say anything until somebody starts listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's a little overzealous. No, what's going on at Guantanamo is not a little overzealous.
1 minute left.
Okay, a free enterprise. Of the so-called recovery, 121% of the increase in income in the so-called recovery has gone to the top 1%.
Yeah.
And I've got the original on that citation, although it's not in hand. You need to look up, actually, everyone, there's a thing going on called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is an attempt to rewrite the Constitution to give corporate privilege a place in the Constitution. This so-called trade agreement has 26 sections, 5 of which are about trade. And it's being written in secret, or the actual writing the document is going on, and Trans-Pacific Partnership. And speaking of reading the Constitution, one of the key vulnerabilities of the Constitution is that a treaty has the same legal status as the Constitution itself. So if the other 21 articles in the Trans-Pacific Partnership can be gotten into a treaty, that makes them the Constitution.
It's a law.
Now, and finally, there's a notion floating around in general that we have not learned the lessons of Vietnam. Well, in fact, the Pentagon did learn the lessons of Vietnam. They haven't drafted any college students since. They got poor people that nobody gives a damn about out there dying. Somebody pointed out a few weeks ago that the Boston Marathon bombing a couple of months ago, there was more blood and gore in the news from the Boston Marathon bombing than there has been from the entire Iraq war. I wasn't super optimistic, but I do wish our speakers, for all of their virtues and hard work, had a few more ideas of something I could do about all this crap.
Speaker gets the last word. Your turn. You got like 7-8 minutes before we close.
Just a couple points, because a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. For those who think it's about alleged torture, I highly recommend the Torture Team. It is an investigation by an internationally recognized scholar of international law. How he investigated, is it really torture, under the Bush regime? It reads like a mystery novel. Great book. It's Philippe Sands, but he is from the UK. And I have other books here so that people can look into this themselves. Also, I just wanted to mention that Close Guantanamo Now, that ad that World Can't Wait placed in the New York Times, if you go to that online, all the facts in there are the citations for where we got those facts are given. And one of the people who helped us work on that was Sharif Bassiuni, who founded the Institute of International Law here at DePaul University. So everything in there is documented. You can trace every single thing we're saying, and these are not allegations. Just one point that was brought up, we shouldn't equate Guantanamo with regular prisons in the US where people are incarcerated who have committed crimes. What we were equating was the way that people are treated. Solitary confinement. I don't care if you were what you were convicted of. First off, some people have a lot more faith in the US court system than I do. Coming from Illinois, I know that we had a death row on which, how many people? 25, 6, 7?
13 out of 25 were innocent.
That we know of. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have over half of the people on death row were determined to have been innocent, and they were going to be killed, okay? So even leaving that aside, even if we were to grant that everyone in prison rightfully belongs there, and many of them do, how do they end up in solitary confinement? Does a court, does a judge put them there? No, it's completely arbitrary, the decision of the jailers, of the prison guards, of the prison hierarchy. And I'll tell you one category of prisoners who is most likely to end up in solitary confinement: jailhouse lawyers. Because they know the law and they're troublemakers, and so they shut them up. It's torture. They're murky characters. Yeah, you open your mouth in prison, you will go, if they have a solitary confinement, you are likely to end there. Up there. So in that sense, yes, there is something like Guantanamo. People are put into torture for completely arbitrary reasons and under no external oversight. So there is a real parallel there. Not to say, and I did say that, not to say that the judicial, I said, however fractured our judicial system is, the military commissions are complete sham. So I'm not saying they're the same. But in that sense, they are the same. And torture is torture no matter who is the victims. I also, Charles said half of what I was going to say about the experience of Germany in the 30s. It was incremental. There's time, there were points at which if the German people had actually stood up, things might have gone in a very different direction. I'm sure you all have heard Pastor Niemöller's famous quote, first they came for the communists and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't, Jews. Then they came for the Jews, I didn't say anything. The trade unionists, the Catholics, finally they came for me and there was nobody to say anything. And he also said in many speeches after the war, if 20, 30, 40,000 Germans had been determined and put their bodies on the line to stop this madness, and what if they had died in doing so? Maybe millions of people wouldn't have died. And the other, so I agree completely. The other thing that the Nazis did in Germany, they made it all legal. They changed all those laws. Everything they did was legal. They wrote it, and that is what is happening in this country. From the Patriot Act to the military commissions and now to the National Defense Authorization Act, it's all being made legal. And if that is a comfort to you, then that's the direction we're headed on. That is the direction we're headed on. So we're not there yet. We still have time, but not all that much time. And the silver dust, that's right. If we're going to be pacified with fantasies about what maybe once was, which I think is a fantasy anyway, but and not actually confront the reality, then that is the direction we're going to head. So thank you very much for having us.
All right, that was good. What did you guys learn?
Did you want to go up
to learn everything?